A strange incident happened to me recently, and I don't know what to do, or even how to process it. I work at a call center that takes calls for a large internet company. Today was like any other day. I sat down, opened the necessary windows, and prepared to answer some calls. I work on the retention side of things, where people call in to remove a line of business or cancel their accounts. However, we do get some calls where people want to transfer services or just change the name on their accounts. Today I got a call to cancel an account that's already been canceled. Here's how it went for context. I began the call as usual. "Thank you for calling. My name is Eric. How can I help you?" I said with confidence. A short time passed before I heard a voice say,
"Yes, my name is Mel. I want to cancel my account."
There was a lot of static and it was really hard to hear her, but I asked, "Of course, may I ask why you're canceling today?" There was a slight pause before I heard her again.
"I can't use it anymore, so I just don't need it,"
she said rather weakly, and it was hard for me to hear her speak. "Oh, of course. Is there a reason why you can't use it? Are you moving?" I asked, my empathy increasing. Then there was a short pause of about only 30 seconds when I heard the voice crystal clear say,
"No, I just can't use it."
Something about this made my spine chill, as if a primal fear of mine had been triggered, and I had no way of stopping it. What do you mean, ma'am?" I asked, my composure shaken.
"I can't see anything. It's cold and wet here. Can you help me?"
Her voice sounded desperate and in pain, but the static was starting to flood the line. It was almost impossible to hear her now, but she kept repeating, "Help me, I'm stuck," from what I could piece together. Her begging escalated into yelling and screams of pain. At one point, I had to put my headset down because it was so loud. It was loud enough that my neighbor working next to me noticed and gasped. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just this lady isn't making much sense." I grabbed my headset and unmuted the mic. "Ma'am, I would love to help you, but I can't understand you. Can you get to a place where there is no static?" I said, attempting to maintain a false smile and confidence. The static began turning into a deafening silence. I felt like I was floating in an ocean of silence for what it seemed like an eternity until I heard her voice again, very faintly.
"Can you see if there is service available at my address?"
She was starting to sound really muffled. I looked up the address on Google Maps and it led to an old stone wall and a well at the center. "Ma'am, the address you gave me doesn't exist. Is there a new address I could look up?" She fell silent, but with a hushed tone she spoke.
"No, it's cold and wet. Help me. I can't move." The static started to return, slowly increasing in volume as she spoke. I tried lowering my headphone volume, but it only got louder even when I muted it. Then I received a notification on my Google Maps. When I opened it up, the camera seemed to move as if someone were holding it. It slowly walked toward the well. A feeling of dread washed over me, something I had never felt before. I felt true fear, as if something was going to hurt me if I kept watching. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't close the tab or even reset the computer. I was stuck watching this thing walk toward the well. It took a few moments of silent walking before it reached the well. I peered into the well, and all I saw was pristine, clear water. The well inside was covered in moss and cobblestone, but you could see the bottom, and was only water. As I watched, the woman began talking over the phone again. "I am there. Please help me before he gets to me."
That's when the camera fell into the well and landed at the bottom. The well had crystal clear water, except for one thing, a partial hand with only 2 fingertips poking out of the cement floor of the well.
"Help me. I can't move."
She kept repeating this over and over until I finally heard her scream and the camera cut off. The call was disconnected, and I was left there, crying. I don't remember crying, but tears were flowing down my face. Later that week, my boss called me in for coaching and sat me down. "Eric, we pulled one of your calls, and there was one strange call. Can you help us make sense of it?" He played the call, and we both listened in silence. It was all static on her end, and you could hear me talking to myself the whole time. She didn't say a word, but everything I did, like pulling up her account and address, was shown on my screen. "So, were they wanting to cancel? We couldn't hear them. Could you?" he asked, visibly shaken by the interaction. I looked at him, a tear running down my face. She needed help. She's stuck. I was in a trance, and only realized this after my boss told me what happened. We agreed to forget about the call after the meeting. I'm taking a mental break, using my paid vacation. I don't know what I should have done. Should I have helped her? I've been blind since birth. As I grew up, everything was described to me in such vivid detail that I didn't even realize why it was so important to see, especially having no reference point to compare it to. We lived in a single-floor ranch house. That's what Father told me. In my mind, of course I could see, although unlike how a sighted person could, I had a spatial awareness. I knew where my bedroom was, where the bathroom, living room, and kitchen were. Each wall had its own texture. I don't know if that was done on purpose, or I could feel things others never noticed. I rarely fell over, only if Father or one of the visitors put something somewhere they shouldn't have. It was usually the visitors, and Father would shout. They visited infrequently, and only briefly when they did. Father said I shouldn't speak to them, that it unsettled him. He'd worry when I saw something he didn't. Saw it with my ears, or by touch. Ellie was the first. She seemed very sweet. She asked me for my name and why my face was so messed up. She was in the living room. I could hear where she sat from her breaths. Harsh, nasal sounds, as if her nose was blocked up. When Father had a cold, he'd always breathe through his mouth, big, labored breaths, as he wasn't used to it. When people mentioned my face, I always touched it, trying to work out why it was so strange to them. When I asked if I could touch theirs, there was always a pause. I guess sighted people never did that. Why would they need to? When I asked Ellie if I could touch her face, she agreed, but moments later, Father entered the room and asked me who I was talking to. I told him, nobody. He would always punish me when I spoke about them. I think he's scared of them. He'd take my arm and march me off. I would be knocked off balance and disoriented to the point where he finally set me down. My hands would frantically search my surroundings until I knew where I was. It was usually my bedroom, though every now and then he'd leave me outside in the middle of nowhere. That was the worst. I would be lost and scared. He told me about the road that ran in front of our house and explained that the sounds I heard were cars, that they could kill me if I touched them. Those sounds were my only means of recognizing my surroundings. I waited until I heard one, and then I knew which way to run back to the house. I heard Ellie that evening. She whispered to me, saying that she was scared. I whispered back, but she didn't hear me. I asked Father about Ellie. He didn't want to talk about her. I asked him why. He didn't reply. When I told him that she asked about my face, he asked me how I responded. I told him I wanted to touch hers. He laughed, though I knew he wasn't happy. I could hear the difference. When you laugh for pleasure, your mouth is wide open. When you pretend, your mouth is almost closed. To me, the difference is obvious. It wasn't until I was older that he explained. He said we lived in a special place, connected to the other world. That sometimes dead people would slip through. People who have died in pain and wanted to reach the living. He explained that because I couldn't see, I was able to tune into that. That they knew I was listening when others weren't. He said I had to ignore it. Otherwise, he told me, they'd latch on and never leave me. All the dead want is to be alive again, he said. It was dangerous, and they would trick me. He said he knew how to deal with them, but he couldn't help me if they become attached to me. Alex appeared to me a few years later. She told me she was lost and didn't know where she was. I told her I wasn't allowed to speak to her. Still, she pleaded for help. I kept quiet, knowing what would happen if I said anything. "Did you speak to them?" Father asked. Though I was upset, I told him no. I wish I could help her. I knew what it felt like to be lost, and it scared me. Alex didn't whisper to me at all. I ignored her, and she ignored me. Father saved me, and I was thankful. After Alex, I knew what I needed to do, so I did it. The spirit stopped bothering me after that for a very long time. That was until Sarah appeared. Sarah didn't give me a chance to be quiet. I was on my own, sitting in the living room and listening to the television. "Help," she said. "I need to find a way out." I stayed silent. "You can hear me, can you?" she asked, surprised. "I'm not allowed to speak to you," I told her. "Please," she begged. "I'm scared. I'm lost. I want to see my daddy." I gripped the arms of the chair and told her I wasn't allowed. "He's dead," she said. I didn't answer. "Your father is dead," she said again. I wasn't going to fall for it. I heard banging from around the door as things began to fly and shells began to shake. "Stop it," I shouted, and it did. "Please help me leave," she said. I wasn't going to talk to her. I did the only thing I thought would help. I unlocked the front door, hoping she'd run out and get lost, just like I would do. When I heard from her no more, I locked the door and sat back down. I listened intently for any signs she was still there. Except for the sounds of the TV, it was silent. I hated when my heart raced. I became all too aware of the tick-tock feeling of the rise and fall within my chest, like it was about to explode. When I heard my father's voice, I screamed. "Son," he said, "I need your help. I think I'm dying." I did what he told me to do. I didn't speak. If he did die, he'd never leave me. Instead, I raced out into the open air and shouted for help. I shouted until my voice was hoarse. I heard the sounds of cars racing along the road in front of my house. I shouted and shouted until I heard someone respond. It was a woman. "What's wrong?" they asked. I told them I think my father was dying. They asked me what happened to my face. I pleaded with them to help me, and they promised me they would. I sat down on the grass and waited. Sometime later, the woman returned to me and asked if she could hold my hand. "I'm so sorry," she told me. I heard the sounds of sirens and of people rushing. I asked what was going on. The woman said she was there for me. As the noise died down, a man asked me a question. "I'm a paramedic," he said. "What happened to your face?" I told him I was fine. He asked if I was sure, and I told him I was. He asked if I minded him touching my face. I said it was okay. A moment later, I felt the pressure release from around my forehead, and the air felt cold against my skin. It sounded like he was peeling an orange. That's what I imagined in my head, and I was worried that he'd expose my insides. I screamed, and I asked what was going on. He told me everything was going to be okay, and the woman squeezed my hand, telling me to be brave. I didn't know what it was I was experiencing. I felt a tight pain within my head, like when you smash your shins against something hard, followed by something I've come to understand as bright. It hurt so much, I began to cry. "What happened to your eyes?" the paramedic asked. I said I was blind. He asked me to check them. The pain returned when he examined them. "Do you know him?" the man asked the woman who had helped me. She told me that I had been screaming for help and that she had come to my aid, but that she had never met me before. "How long have you had your eye injury?" he asked me. I told him I had been blind from birth. He asked me if I could see his fingers. I told him no. He asked me if I could open my eyes. I said I didn't know what that meant. He asked me if he could open them for me. I didn't respond. Then I felt his fingers on my face, fingers covered in something rubbery. Suddenly, it became bright again. I screamed. He tried to calm me down. The woman squeezed my hand again. I didn't know what was happening. Things I couldn't describe came to me. I carried on screaming as a fuzzy form came into view. "Just breathe, okay?" the paramedic said. "Everything will be fine. When was the last time you saw?" As my heart began to calm and my breathing slowed, I became distracted by what I was experiencing. It overwhelmed me. I wanted to cry, and I did. "How long has it been?" he asked again. "I've never seen anything before," I told him. I was told to keep an eye mask on most of the day, only taking it off at night at first to allow my eyes to adjust. At the same time, I was placed in the custody of my aunt and uncle, and I didn't even know it at first. They were shocked at what happened to me, and that I had never attended school. The past few years have been a roller coaster ride. The doctors say I may never have perfect vision, though what little I do have is a godsend, and I'll take what I can get. I've only recently been learning to read and write, so I apologize if my English isn't the greatest. It's the best I can do. I've been asking my aunt what happened to my father, but all she says is that he died of a heart attack. I asked what sort of man he was. She says he was her brother, and she'll love him no matter what. My uncle doesn't want to talk about him at all. I've been using the computer a lot recently, and I really enjoy using the internet. I can't believe such a thing exists. After being lonely for so long, I can talk to who I want when I want, though I'm wary of them. After all, how do I know if who I'm speaking to is alive? No one seems to share my father's concern about that. Today, I was on a forum discussing the spirit world. I was so happy to find people who I could relate to, and someone curious about my username sent me a link about an article on a true crime website. It was about my father, and it mentioned me by name. They asked me who I was, and if I was the same person. According to the article, my mother had gone missing soon after my birth. It said I'd been bound so that I couldn't see, that my father always wanted a daughter. They found 14 bodies in the basement. They said one got away, a girl by the name of Sarah Frank. She was the one that called the police. They found father's car parked around the back of the house. They suppose he carried his victims into the basement via the storm entrance and left them there. Sarah had managed to get away after she agreed to be his daughter following 4 days of sustained torture. She stabbed him with a knife he'd placed on the counter to butter some toast. I didn't want to believe it, and I'm not sure I would have if it weren't for the names of the victims, 2 of which stuck out, Ellie Farmer and Alex Riddle. I'd spoken to them both in the living room. To this day, I wonder if my father had been honest with me about a single thing in his life. Throughout it all, one question remains above all others. Did I speak to Ellie and Alex before or after he killed them?